Today's video is all about the top 5 weapons to main in Albion Online 2024 as of the EU launch patch. Now, this is mostly for solo players, though these weapons will set you up nicely if you decide later on to do guild activities, and these weapons have multiple different uses. I will be showing them in order of best to worst. I know that's not how normally YouTubers do things. They save the best for last, but I'm putting the best first. Number 1 is the Cursed Staff. Now, everyone saw this one coming that plays the game, but this is the highest, best scaling weapon in the entire game. That means when you earn Specialization Mastery, you upgrade the enchantment levels or the craft levels, you know, the quality of the crafting. All of that, you will feel the power difference. Some items do not scale so well. The Cursed Staff scales better than anything else. This weapon has insanely good single-target DPS as well as multi-target DPS. You can melt entire blobs of mobs with ease. It excels at almost all activities in the entire game. Anything you want to do solo or even with groups of players, it excels at. It is one of the cheaper weapons in the game. It is plentiful. It will never be sold out. It will never be unavailable. It will always be there because it is so easy to make. It is the most powerful punching up weapon in the entire game. This means that if you go in with lower item power against someone with higher item power, then you have a higher % chance to win that fight than with any other weapon. This is also one of the most time-efficient weapons for riskier red and black zone activities. More on this in a little bit. It is a weapon line. The Warlock weapon line is the most useful in the entire game for every single game mode. If you want one weapon line to max out, it is definitely the Warlock weapon line, which the Cursed Staff is part of. It's the best new player starting weapon, and all veteran players eventually max this out, and they don't regret it. They will tell everybody that this is one of the best weapons that you should be using. Max this out ASAP. It is the most feared weapon to fight against in the mists and in 1v1 PvP situations. This weapon is so feared that in the mists, if someone spots you using this weapon, most people will team up against you simply because you use this weapon. And in Corrupted Dungeons, a lot of players take not only 1, but 2 defensive counters to this weapon just in case they fight one, because it is a nightmare to fight against. And also, it is the best weapon line to max out first for those that want to play Albion Online in the long term, meaning when you max out the Warlock weapon line, you are setting yourself up for the fastest fame farming in the entire game. Furthermore, it is a 6-minute Corrupted Dungeon clear weapon. It is the fastest way to kill tracking beasts solo. The Shadow Caller, which is part of the Warlock weapon line, is the fastest fame farming weapon in the game. And to make the most out of Shadow Caller, you will need to max out the Cursed Staff first. It is the best ratting weapon in the entire game. You can just go into the mists with the cheapest possible set and make millions of silver. It is also, the Shadow Caller is in high demand for ZVZ, guild stuff, group stuff, PvE stuff, as well as many other weapons in the Warlock weapon tree, not just the Shadow Caller. The Shadow Caller is the second best skinning weapon in the entire game. The Cursed Staff is an auto win against anyone without hard counters. They can DPS while dodging mob attacks and retreating from players. It is the best new player AoE fame farm weapon, end of. And now the bad stuff. So many players, because they hate this weapon so much, will run hard counters in PvP zones. You encounter them so often. This weapon also has no mobility. Yes, it has a passive that lets you run a bit faster. It's not considered a mobility weapon. And while you can root players, it's not long enough to really be considered a mobility weapon. Only the Shadow Caller has decent sustain. You can use lifesteal roasts to have some sustain, but other than that, you don't really have a way to self-heal in a wacky situation. This weapon is hated by the community, so if you join a guild or you try to make some friends, they will talk crap about Cursed Staff players. That includes you. And to fame farm, to min-max with the Shadow Caller, takes a pretty big silver and time investment that some players just aren't ready to do, especially if they're new. But the sooner you do it, the better it pays, the more dividends you will get. So I recommend that you go all in at the start if you're a brand new player, especially on Europe. Also, this weapon is not meant for PvE and PvP at the same time. This means if you want to farm and clear mob camps, then you have certain abilities for that, like the Cursed Puddle and Cursed Laser, whereas the Cursed Puddle is not a good option for PvP fights because players aren't going to stand in your puddles unless you have a friend to hold them down into the puddle. Then it's great. But because of that, you have to switch your skills, and those skills aren't that good or fast at killing mobs. If you want to learn more about the Cursed Staff, you can go to my channel, click the search button here, and type in Cursed Staff, and then, yes, it is spelled cursed, but you can type Cursed Staff. I have it set that way. You can learn all about many different things like Cursed Skull. You can learn about Shadowcaller, best builds. Here is a video with every weapon and ability at max level. Very, very cool. How to rat in the mists. There is a whole bunch of things here. The fastest way to level a new character, of course, that is Cursed Staff. And you can solo outpost bosses. There's so much things that you can do with the Cursed Staff weapon line. Just search my channel. I have over 740 videos for you. And on to the next weapon. Oh, and that Fame Farm stuff. For those that don't know, the Shadowcaller weapon allows you to solo group dungeons all by yourself. It allows you to solo bosses, most bosses, not all bosses, and you can solo static areas meant for groups of players. That's how we min-max fame farming. Number 2 is the axe weapon line, the Battleaxe mainly here. It is cheap, it's reliable, it's easy and simple to use, it has high damage, it does have some sustain. It is a semi-mobile weapon later on when you unlock more abilities. It is the de facto best brawling weapon in small-scale PvP like the Mists. It is highly underestimated in PvP. So many people will make mistakes when fighting a Battleaxe user, and if you are a skilled Battleaxe user in PvP, you will win far more fights than you will lose most of the time. The entire weapon line is useful. So not just the Battleaxe, but the Great Axe, the Realm Breaker, the Bear Paws. This weapon has very little counters, and the counters it does have are rarely played. It can solo group content, just not as fast as a few of the other weapons like the Shadowcaller. It is a medium demand. It's in medium demand in group play, and it's a very fair starter weapon. It's not the best starter weapon for a new player, but it has decent in-game potential as well, just not the best. The Battleaxe is part of the Axe group, which is Bear Paws, Carrying Collar, Great Axe, Realm Breaker, etc. So the Bear Paws are the de facto best ganking weapon in the entire game. They are the best solo PvP dismount weapon in the entire game. The Carrion Collar, if you like to play Arena, is just free wins for solo queue, assuming you're not playing against a pre-made team that prepared for it. The Great Axe is an easy, low IQ weapon for fame farming. You can give this to a small child, someone who is not good at video games, or someone who has special needs, like phone players. If you're a mobile phone player, then the Great Axe is an okay and easy and simple choice. You'll be able to get the job done with it. It's not the best choice, but if you're not very good at video games, the Great Axe kind of carries you a little bit. And yes, I'm being mean to phone players. It's useful in ZVZs, the Realm Breaker, and organized gank squads. It is very hard to beat a Battleaxe user in a 1v1 fight unless you counter them. Oh, thanks, Bandit Assault, for interrupting me. It's just a really good brawling weapon. It can chase most targets that aren't mobility builds, and it has decent clear speed for dungeons, corrupted, and solo. It does PvE, VP very well. That means you're fighting mobs and someone jumps you. Well, you can just fight back. You don't have to, like, switch your abilities or run away or die. You can just kill the mob and fight them. And now for the bad. So, missing your E-spell with Battleaxe can cost you fights. If you are not good at landing that skill shot, you will die. You won't kill your opponent. You won't get that critical healing axe throw that you needed. You can't really execute mobility builds like Bloodletter and Double Bladed because if they're losing the fight, they just run away. And while you do have some mobility, if they're not a terrible player, you can't catch them regardless. It's not enough mobility to be a mobility build. It's not the fastest at mob clearing. It's decent. It's not the slowest. It's not the fastest. ZVZ spots in guilds might be filled by senior members who use Realm Breaker. And if you're new to the guild, they'll probably want you to play something else. And yeah, that sucks if you main axes. It can take a while for a brand new player to unlock the core abilities that will make fame farming faster and efficient, and it can be very samey and very boring, I guess, to fame farm with if you're brand new on your first day. Bear Paws and Realm Breaker can be expensive, especially on new servers. You won't top the kill boards in a ZVZ fight. You're more of a debuffer. You make things bleed. You lower, the enemy's ability to heal, and you lower their maximum and current HP. That's basically your job. Also, the Axe weapon line feels kind of middle of the road in terms of performance. You're not the best or worst at anything, but if like 1v1 brawling is your thing, then absolutely you'll love this weapon, and it's still a good weapon to use and max out eventually. It's just nice to have that variety. If you want more info on axes, go to my channel. Once again, type axe into the search, and there will be tons of axe-related videos for you to consume. And yeah, some of these aren't really in the titles for axes, but they're there. They talk about axes. They use axes. Go check them out. Number 3 is the Druidic Staff, or the Nature Staff weapon line. It is the best sustain for PvE and PvP and duo PvP. It is the best PvE punch-up weapon, meaning you can take on much more difficult enemies in higher level zones, even if you don't have the Reaver levels unlocked as a new player. You can solo group content decently well, probably the second best solo group dungeon weapon in the game. You can rat PvE content in full loot zones very well. It is sometimes unkillable in a 1v1 depending on your gear versus theirs and their build. There are very few builds that can actually kill you, though you won't be able to kill most builds because they can just run away, you don't have mobility, but because you have so much sustain, you're very hard to kill. It is a great weapon choice for people doing a fresh start or a 0 to hero if they've played and they know the game. It's not the most newbie-friendly weapon, but it's still, if you have any grasp of gaming at all, like you've played MMORPGs before, this is more than fine to use. You can solo aspects and bosses meant for groups of players with this weapon. High specialization is not necessary for this weapon to show its full potential. This can be a downside, more on that in a bit. But most players won't even fight you if you have this weapon equipped. It's just not worth the time, especially if it's a cheap one. Let me just tell you a quick story about this. So, with an 8.4 healing holy weapon, and I found a guy with Druidic Staff. He had a flat 4 Druidic Staff. I had to chase him through half of an entire zone before I killed him. Half of a zone, and I had max spec and 8.4 excellent quality gear. And it took me half a zone with a healing staff to kill this guy, who just had a flat 4. He was brand new, and he just ran and kept healing himself, and it was like a good 5-7 minute, jaunt. All right, so a lot of players, they see this weapon, they're like, I can't even, I'm not even going to bother. They'll just leave you alone. Now, this is a healing weapon, and people love healers, so if you want to make friends or heal groups, then this is a good weapon to use. To add, the Blight Staff, which is part of the Nature weapon line, is the best AoE group healing weapon in the entire game. The Druidic Staff is also reasonably cheap and plentiful. It is powerful regardless of your specialization, item power, or mastery. It is decent DPS. It's very close to Shadowcaller, but not quite, so it is comparable, though. And you can make a lot of silver if you rat Black Zone statics using this weapon. And now for the bad. So the Nature Staff weapon line has the worst item power scaling in the entire game, meaning if you put a lot of work and effort to max out each weapon, you're not going to see much results. The weapon has no mobility whatsoever. If you PvE in a dangerous zone, you have to use Thorns, which leaves a big circle on the ground that a ganker can just simply step on with their mount, despawning your mount and putting you in combat, meaning you're basically dead. And the weapon itself is very boring to use. You make little thorn puddles, and you auto-attack, and then you heal. And that's really all you do. There's not a whole lot going on there. You can spread healing sickness to a lot of people in a faction fight if you go healing instead of thorns, and people will hate you for this. I think it's funny. Healing is also delayed. Your main E-spell's heal is delayed, so you can be bursted down. Also, the Nature Staff healing weapon line relies on healing over time rather than burst heals. So in like higher end PvP situations, people prefer a holy staff user as a healer. So if you want to main a healer, the nature weapon line isn't really the best choice. Also, there's not really that many other good weapons in the nature staff tree other than the blight. That's it. Like, the other weapons just suck in comparison. Druidic and blight are the only good ones. Now, great nature has niche uses for keeping you alive, but really that's it. It's not really all that useful. Again, you can search my channel by typing out nature, and you'll see all these videos. I made 2 videos about how it's the worst scaling weapon in the game, because people didn't believe me the first time. I even did more testing. I also talked about the new skills here, just nature staff in all and every situation, an unbeatable self-sustained PvP build that still works to this day. And yeah, there's the OP PvP build. This one's a really good one. This one involves the Druidic Staff and how to solo group dungeons. And there you go. Just check those videos out if you're interested. Now we have the War Gloves weapon line. No particular weapon in this weapon line. You can pick your favorite. But the entire weapon line is very high mobility, with battle bracers being the best. And my character's logging out for some reason. Thought to move them. Okay, so it has decent PvE. The Earthsign Maulers and the spiked bracers are insanely good for PvE. And PvP damage, like Hellfire and Avalonian Fists, are basically in insane demand. It is one of the best choices for general mist activity. You can PvE, you can PvP, you have mobility, you can run from most things, not double-bladed and daggers and what else is it? Yeah, Bloodletter. Like, those are kind of hard to escape from, but everything else you can probably slip away from. It doesn't really have a hard counter unless you fight Fire Staff users, and even then, Avalonian Fist can still beat those. So there you go. It's very high demand for guilds. They all want you to run Hellfire Hands. They all want a Spike Gauntlet user. Maybe even some Earthsign punching dudes. Like, there's at least 3 weapons right there that guilds want you to be running. It can one-shot mobs in PvE. You can go with a cheap Earthsign Maulers set, and you can just push E on a group of mobs and delete them all in a few seconds. Or you can run a very high-tier Spike Gauntlets and then instantly smash mobs in a yellow zone. It's one of my favorite, like, open-world fame-forming weapons for sure. It is really good in Arena, especially if you are good at positioning and using different abilities. You can really mess people up in Arena with these weapons. It's the most fun weapon line in the game, bar none. The fist weapons feel amazing, they're fun, they're mobile, the skills are flashy. You're going to have fun using this weapon over everything else I've talked about in the video. Now, it is a low skill floor and a high skill ceiling, meaning if you're a low IQ, you know, drugged out, you're token high, you're on drugs, you're drunk, you can still play this weapon decently well. And but if you're like a pro gamer, you know, ex-StarCraft player, you're gonna play this game even better. Now, the item power scaling on these weapons are great. You will feel, you know, your character improve as you level up this weapon line. And now for the bad stuff. So, War Gloves are expensive, especially if you're in a guild. You can't solo group stuff comfortably. You kind of can with, like, maximum specs 8.4 Awakened. It's not as fast, it's not as comfortable, there's no sustain, it's not that great. You can't really do much against fire and frost users, depending on your weapon. There's a few things you can do, like Avalonian Fist can kind of fight fire users. Frost Staff users are just going to kite you forever. You can't really chase a good mobility build, like Bloodletter and Double Bladed. If they're losing the fight, they will outrun you. You can't execute them, you can't burst them down, unless you're Hellfire Hands and you have a Keeper Cape and you do a cringe combo. That's the only time you're ever killing them. But they just won't engage you. They'll see your ability, they'll see your build, and they'll just be like, nah, I'll fight someone else. You are constantly being nerfed by the devs. The War Gloves weapon line is just nerfed every single patch, for real, I'm not even joking. If you do decide to play this weapon line, expect it to get worse over the years. Alright, regearing in a guild costs a lot of silver. If you die with these things, and if you are, you know, proficient in War Gloves, they're going to want you to run Hellfire Hands. And you're going to be paying out the wazoo if you die. Which, thankfully, War Gloves are a very defensive weapon, but you still will die. So, it requires knowledge of other weapons and how other weapons work and operate and how other weapons fight in PvP to do well with War Gloves, because you're kind of reactionary in some fights. So this, again, implies the high skill ceiling, which I think is a bad thing. It can be good or bad, depending on how you look at it. You do have mana issues when you use War Gloves. You will go out of energy. You will run out of energy without specific boots, capes, potions, etc., food even. And so you can't fight forever. You will eventually, like a boxer, gas yourself out and be too exhausted to use abilities. And the only good PvE that these weapons, do compared to everything else I've shown on the list so far is open world, miscamps, and abbeys, which the other weapons can do just fine. Although this weapon line does them slightly faster and somewhat a little, I would say, safe enough. But the nature weapon line beats safety. The curse staff weapon line can melt bosses and group dungeons and stuff. These weapons cannot do group content, solo that is. And because of that's why I'm rating them at number 4, is they just can't do the solo group stuff, and that's a huge fundamental part of being a solo and guildless player. Just type in solo on my channel and look at all the videos and see exactly why you want to be playing solo, why you want to be able to do this group content solo. It's very much worth it to invest in a weapon line that allows you to do this content, because if you don't, you're going to fall behind when you eventually get bored and you want to play something else. Number 5 is the Fire Staff. Now, the Fire Staff hard counters most melee opponents. The Wild Fire Staff is the second best punching up weapon in the entire game, meaning if you have a 5.1 and you're fighting an 8.3 melee user, you can kill them, and many people have done so. It is insanely high single target DPS as long as you're not crowd controlled. You will melt a single target really, really fast, especially in PvP. The Blazing Staff is the best in-slot weapon for duo ganking. There is a combo with the Incubus Mace, where an Incubus Mace shrinks a target and holds them in place and stuns them. The Blazing Staff rolls up with a Flame Tornado, just completely deletes anybody that gets caught in this combo. It is free loot incarnate. The weapons are cheap. Fire Staffs are very cheap. It is the best skinning weapon in the game for blue and yellow zones. Now, I would elaborate, but this is a members-only secret. If you want in on this, you have to pay $5 a month. Click the join button down below to get access to videos that are too good for the general public. Anyway, so it's a great starter weapon. As far as like tier 2 weapons goes, it's the best tier 2 weapon in the game. Not that you'll be using that very long, maybe your first 15 minutes of playing, but it's still a great starter weapon. PvE is decent speed. You can solo group content with the Fire Staff, though it is not as good as the other weapons listed. It does beat the War Gloves, though. Now, Blazing is also the best in-slot weapon for open-world boss nuking. If you just want to hunt open-world bosses, the Blazing Staff is your go-to. And yes, it out-DPSs Boltcasters now. I've tested this thoroughly. Now, Brimstone is the biggest AoE damage skill in the game. You summon a giant meteor, it comes crashing down, stuns targets, deals tons of damage. It hits harder than any other AoE in the game. So if you want to do like be like part of a new ZVZ crowd, you can do that. It has mild demand in ZVZ. There's the Dawn Song, which is somewhat in demand, but not really. It really depends on the guild and the composition. And now for the bad, the Pyroblast ability on the Fire Staff. It can hit critters, so if you're a player and you're about to get Pyroblasted, you can duck behind a small little fox creature, and the Pyroblast will hit it instead of you, and as the Fire Staff user, this is the worst feeling that can possibly happen. It's a very mild mobility weapon. Yeah, you have a little speed boost that you can give yourself, but it's not really better than the Battleaxe or anything, or the Axe weapon line, so to speak. It has limited range. There is one spell that has a long range, and that's really it. It's not the most ranged attack weapon in the game. There are some useless double-use skills, especially in certain matchups or in certain situations. There's just no reason to use them at all. And this weapon, some of the weapons within the Fire Staff tree have been nerfed so severely that they aren't used in anything at all in the entire game. So you have dead weapon lines, and that's not really fun to invest in or use, especially if you plan to play the game a long time. Now, this weapon line also, as a solo player, it's not as fun as other spellcaster weapons. Yeah, in duos, it's pretty fun. But as a solo player, not really so much. And really, this weapon is just a filler on the list. I didn't have anything else to pick, and Fire Staff was like the next best thing over the other weapons. And that's it. That's the video. No honorable mentions. There will be no honorable mentions in these types of videos. With that said, leave a like, leave a comment. What is your top 5 favorite weapons? And on the right side of your screen is a video you should absolutely click. And if you don't click it, then you're going to get some food stuck in between your teeth. And if you don't have teeth, then I don't know.